You know, I really don't mind my height. As I was growing up, I did, but my grandmother used to tell me, as long as your feet reach the floor, you're not too short. But I got to Japan, and I was on the tall side. So I liked being there, and as I said, I believe God knew where I was going even well before I did. Brother Dan was, and I just wish there were some way, as they built that building at that high speed, it wasn't built that way. It wasn't built that way at all. There were hours and hours and hours of labor. Volunteers coming from the States, some of them that were more in the way than they were helpers. Some that did a great job, all that. But God has done a marvelous work through this missionary and his wife. He's not that much younger than me, but I almost feel like that he's like my son. But he has been faithful in every area of his life. He can work circles around almost anybody that I know. And he always has a good attitude, always willing to help others all over Japan. So his influence and his ministry is not just there in Okinawa. When we had to replace all of our buildings after the earthquake, Dan was there every time we had a large group to come. And he was there. He could speak the language, and he could also coordinate the work and read all of those blueprints, things I couldn't do. Pastor talked about anyway, about him sending all those containers of stuff. We did that too. I remember one time I have had a part and been kind of the leader in bringing in, I don't know how many containers over the 33 years I was there full time. And I was talking one time, and I said, God has been good because of all the containers, and I would say at least 100 different containers, counting all the ones for the earthquake and all the missionaries I helped bring their things in, and all of those things, and always there at customs. And I said, through all these years, I have never one time had to pay duty or customs on any container that I brought into the country. Dan was sitting there, and you remember what you said? He said, well, I don't remember one time that I brought in a container that I didn't have to pay duty. So I don't know. I've become known as the negotiator in Japan. One time I was in the States during my wife's illness, and they were sending in containers, and the time that the Japanese government allowed for relief containers to come in had passed. But we still needed to send some more supplies because for two reasons. One, if you bought them in Japan, they were far more expensive. The other reason is because of the earthquake, there were no materials available. There were other places that got more priority than a Christian school or a Christian church. And so therefore, even if we had the money, there was no place to buy the material. So we were sending it in anyway. So we were sending another 40-footer. And it was on its way to Japan, and had actually gotten there. And I got a phone call from our Japan, who was the vice president of our Bible college at that time. And I was in the States because of health reasons for Odessa, and we were getting ready to go back. And he called me and he said, we're going to have to pay. And I think he said something like about $1,200 for customs. And I said, why? He said, because they're telling me that we have to. I said, well, don't pay it. He said, well, we've already told them we were going to. I said, what do you mean, we? I said, if you pay $1,200, it's not we, it's you. I said, I'll be there in 4 days. You wait. And so he said, okay, I'll wait. And so he called the customs place and waited. I got there, and I went in, and right before I left to go back to Japan, I looked at my passport, and my visa was expired. So I thought, what am I going to do? I'm leaving in 4 days. No way I can get one. So I thought, well, I'll just go as a tourist. So I went in on a tourist visa, had 90 days to be there. I went in, and so as soon as I got there, the very next day we went down to customs. And of course, there I was. I'm not allowed to declare anything when I come in as a tourist. As a person coming in on a permanent visa, you can declare unaccompanied baggage, but I couldn't. But I went down and I saw the head honcho, the main man, whatever you call him in English. He was sitting back there on the back desk. The more important you are, the farther you are away from the counter. And he was way back in the back. And so when I went into the office, I began to bow like this with my eyes looking at him. I was bowing at him, and this lady agent that was at the counter was a little bit irritated with me because I was ignoring her. And so he motioned me back. And I went back, and I began to explain our situation, that we had a container, and it was for earthquake relief, and we were replacing the buildings that had been destroyed in the earthquake and everything. And, he said, well, let me see your visa. And I said, well, I can show it to you, but I came in as a tourist. He said, well, you can't declare anything. I said, I know that, but there's special circumstances. My wife was ill, and I ran out of my permanent visa, and I'm going to renew it, but I just didn't have time before I could come over here and meet this container. And I said, is there not any way you could let it in? And he looked at me, and he said, well, you'll have to have a letter of apology. So I reached in my pocket and pulled it out and said, here it is. And he began to laugh. And he really did. In Japan, you have to know the Japanese. I really did have to have a letter of apology that said, please forgive this ignorant foreigner for making it so complicated for you to perform your responsibilities as a leader. And I humbly beg you to forgive my ignorance. And just this one time, please let this go. And he did. That wasn't the end of the story, though. It kept getting worse. Because, there stood this Japanese pastor, and he said he was amazed. He would have paid the $1,200 that we didn't have without thinking about it, and then expect it to come from somewhere. But then they said, well, go down and let's look at what you've got. And I got down there, and one of our volunteers that had filled that container for us had padlocked it with 2 big, huge padlocks and sent no keys. So there I was trying, and this lady was getting all upset with it, and I was trying to borrow something that I could cut those locks off with or anything. And we were right down below that, the head man's office, and he looked out the window, and he yelled, he said, what's going on? And the lady that was looking at the stuff looked up and said, they don't have a key to open it. He said, just tell them to go on. So we went right on home without even ever opening that container. So I don't know the difference between me and Dan Gardner, but I've never paid customs, and he's always paid customs, so I guess it kind of balances out that way. Now, he was in Okinawa, and I think they were a lot harder on you down there in Okinawa. I really do. I want you to turn with me to the book of John. The book of John. Missions. That's the purpose for us being here this week. We're thinking about a world that is in crisis. John 14, verse 27. Jesus, just before he leaves the upper room, he's giving last words to his disciples. And he says to them in verse 27, peace I leave with you. I'm going away. He's giving them, he's saying, he's promising them, I'm leaving you my peace. Now they were going to need it. He was going to go from there to the garden and then be arrested and taken to Pilate's hall mistreated, persecuted, given a mock trial that had no legal basis for anything they did. And they were going to be in fear and terror and panic and dread. But here he says to them, peace I leave with you. My peace I give unto you. Not as the world giveth. We hear about peace all the time. Peace, this conference for peace and that conference for peace. And they can't even agree on which room to meet in to talk about peace. And they have to be so politically correct that they can't really bring up the things that would actually bring about peace. But Jesus says, my peace I give unto you. Not as the world giveth, thank God, give I unto you. Let not your heart be troubled, neither let it be afraid. From there, he left them. On the way to the garden, that marvelous 15th chapter, when he tells them about the need for that intimate relationship. He's the vine, they're just the branches. Without him, they can do nothing. And yet, in a sense, they're going to go through these days when they feel like everything's going to be without him. And they're all alone. And they're in deep grief. They're in deep despair. They're in deep doubt about everything that he did and everything he taught. How can these things be? He promises them that he's going to send God the Holy Spirit. Not just to be with them as he was, but to actually be in them. And then they hear him pray. John chapter 17. That's the Lord's Prayer. That which we call the Lord's Prayer is not the Lord's Prayer at all. It's the prayer he taught his disciples. It's the disciples' prayer. He had no need to pray any of those things that were in there. Thy will be done. I do always the will of the Father, he said. Forgive us our trespasses. He had no trespasses. He who knew no sin was made to be sin for me and for you and for all of the world. So that wasn't the Lord's Prayer. The real Lord's Prayer is John 17, where he prays. And I wish I had time to preach about that, but I don't. But what a marvelous, marvelous experience it was for those disciples to hear him as he lifted his eyes to his Father and prayed. And then they came to the garden. And he said, pray with me. And they went to sleep. They couldn't stay with him even at that time. The soldiers came and took him away, and you all know the story. Then he was taken to be crucified, hanging there between two thieves that represented every person who have ever lived in this world. Both sinners. Both deserving the death that they were receiving. And yet one of them went to heaven and one of them went to hell. What was the difference? The man on the middle cross. One of them said, if you be the Christ, save yourself and us. So we can go on with our life of sin and crime. If you be the Christ, prove it. Prove it. Audacity. And the other one did that for a while. If you study the scripture carefully. But as he watched this man die, he knew it was not just a man. And so he rebuked the other thief and said, we're dying justly for what we deserve. But this man has no sin, no reason to die. And then he cried out, Lord, remember me when you come into your kingdom. You know, there's quite a bit in that little statement. Remember me when you come into your kingdom. He left it all up to Jesus. He didn't tell Jesus what to do. He just said, just remember me. If you come into, no, he said, when you come in. So you see, he hanging on that cross believed in the resurrection of Jesus Christ. He believed that Christ was dying, not for his own sin, but for the sin of others. And he knew in his heart that this was not the end for this man, and this was not the end for him. And he said, Lord, I'm just turning myself completely over to you. I'm leaving it up to you. And Jesus said, I'll do much better than remember you. Today, you'll be with me in paradise. And then, after all the agony and that awful darkness, where when he became sin for us, and all the sin and all the shame of every sinner's sins, all of them, were put upon the Son of God. God would not allow the world to look on. He blackened the whole scene. And out of that darkness, we hear that voice that says, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? You see, when the angels praise God, they always do it with 3 acclamations. Holy, 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 Lord God Almighty. But when Jesus cried from the cross, he said, my God, only twice. Only twice. My God, Father, my God, Spirit, why have you forsaken me? Remember, he had prayed in the garden, Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me. I don't think it had anything to do with the suffering and pain of his earthly body. I think the cup that he said, if it was possible, let it pass, was what was happening in that dark time when he, who had been one with the Father for all of eternity, was forsaken. God forsaken by God. I can't explain it. The disciples watched all that. They had fled. Peter had denied. Judas had betrayed. They were all gone. Only John stood at the cross. And he stood there for one reason, because Jesus loved him, and he realized that. He, the disciple whom Jesus loved. You see, it's great to love Jesus. I think Peter loved Jesus. But our love is not enough. It's too weak. But John said, he loved me. No man ever loved me like this. I don't have anywhere else to go. So he was the only one at the foot of the cross. And then he died. And Joseph and Nicodemus finally, when probably he thought it was too late, finally said, I'm sick and tired of being a secret believer. I want to help with his body. And they buried him. And he was in the tomb. Those hands that had touched and healed lepers and others were still. They weren't moving. That voice that so vibrantly and wonderfully declared truth as no man had ever declared truth were silent in the grave. And the devil thought he had won the victory. But on the 3rd day, the earth began to tremble. And the stone was rolled away, not so he could get out, but so they could get in. And they came there very early in the morning. Now I'm where I wanted to be. It says here that Mary came, Mary Magdalene, and she was seeking Jesus. And she didn't recognize Jesus when he spoke to her. And after he spoke to her, he told her, I ascend to my Father and to your God, my God and your God. And go and tell. And then verse 18, that's our text. Mary Magdalene came where the disciples were and told the disciples that she had seen the Lord and that he had spoken these things unto her. Another account says, but they didn't believe her. Hysterical woman. Bless her heart, her grief has called her to be having hallucinations. Poor Mary. Mary, come over here and sit down. Let us get you some water to drink. Just sit here and relax. We know that this has been a traumatic weekend for you, just like it has for us. Just be quiet here and get hold of your senses. And then verse 19. Then the same day, at evening, being the first day of the week, when the doors were shut, where the disciples were assembled for fear of the Jews, came Jesus and stood in the midst and said unto them, Peace be unto you. Remember, he said, Peace I leave with you. My peace I give unto you. Not as the world giveth. But they'd forgotten that. They were scared to death. They were there in that upper room. And Jesus appeared in their midst. That locked door where they were did not keep him out. He was there in their midst. And in tenderness, he said to them. He didn't say to them like I would have said to them, why in the world are you so afraid? Didn't I tell you that I would leave my peace with? And that's what I would have done. But he didn't. In tenderness, he said, Peace be unto you. And when he had so said, he showed unto them his hands and his side. Then were the disciples glad when they saw the Lord. See, he said, I'm giving you my peace to calm your fears. Peace to calm our fears. You see, they were terrified. Fear is controlling. They were in that upper room scared to death about what was going to happen next. They were trapped, confined, because fear is confining. And they were all there together because fear is contagious. If parents are afraid, children are afraid. If parents have peace and act like nothing's wrong, children will be just as happy as they can be. And that's the way we should be as children of God. I've been in places, and I say this cautiously because sometimes I preach in places where I'm actually ashamed to stand up there and preach. I was in China many, many years ago. I don't remember exactly when, but it was a long time ago, 20 plus years ago at least. That was back when they all still wore the gray uniforms and everybody was very, and Mao was in total control of everything that was going on. And I was able to get in there and they took me to preach at an underground church, which was, again, at the top of this apartment building where you went up these little they took me after dark and took me down an alley and up the stairs. We got into this little room and it was packed with Chinese believers. Most of them were very old. And they told me as we went into the room, now when you preach, you must preach very quietly. Because if someone hears, our whole meeting could be, and they could be thrown into prison. So preach very quietly. And then they said, now after we sing, you can preach. And I thought, I'm supposed to preach quietly and they're going to sing? Doesn't make sense. But something happened that I have never forgotten. when they began to sing, their mouths were moving, but not a sound was coming out. They were singing the words with the tears running down their coarse faces, faces that had faced persecution and all the things that they'd had. And I thought as I was sitting there, how glorious that song must be sounding as it rings through the portals of heaven. I don't think it was silent in heaven as they sang there. And I thought of Psalm 40, verse 3. He hath put a new song in my mouth, even praise unto our God. Many shall see it and fear and trust in the Lord. I saw their song. I couldn't hear it, but I saw it. And I have never gotten over. Now when we go to China, they have boldness, and they get up there, and they stand, and they sing to the top of their lungs, and they want me to play the piano, and they want to sing over and over and over again. And you know, you don't have to worry about time that management when you're in a country like that. They want to get all they can get, and they're disappointed when you quit no matter how long you keep going. But Jesus is there. And there they are in that room. They're scared to death. You know, there are people, even in our own country now, with all of this political correctness and everything that's going on, that are being told that it's okay to do whatever you want to do in your own walls. But you don't have freedom to preach Christ and to live Christ in the public domain. Nonsense. We do. Our Constitution guarantees it. Jesus says, I want to give you peace to control your fear. Be careful, but don't be afraid to preach the gospel. Some people are in restricted countries. They're so paranoid about whether their room is bugged or whether somebody's listening. And that happens. That's true. It all happens. But if you get so fearful that you do nothing, there's no point in being there. There has to be a boldness, but there has to be a peace in your heart. A peace to calm your fears. Now look on very quickly. And our time is nearly gone. But number 2, in verse 21, Jesus said to them again, peace be unto you. As my Father has sent me, even so send I you. Again, he says, peace be unto you. And this time he says, as my Father has sent me, even so send I you. I'm giving you peace to comply with my command. Why are you sitting here in this room? Get out. Go into all the world, just like I've commanded. And as the Father has sent me, even so send I you. And when they did go forth, I believe they had peace in spite of their persecution. As they even died martyrs' deaths, they had peace in spite of their pain. Because he said, peace be unto you. Go as I've commanded you. As the Father hath sent me, even so send I you. And then one more. Verse 24. But Thomas, one of the 12, called Didymus, was not with them when Jesus came. And every preacher says this, you know, every time you miss a service, you miss something important. Thomas should have been there, but he wasn't. I don't know why. I like Thomas. Thomas was transparent and honest, and he didn't try to act like he was more spiritual than he was. In John 14, we see that when Jesus said, you know the way. And he said, Lord, no, I don't. I don't know the way. I have no idea what the way is. You see, one of the things we face as we minister to people is that people will not be honest about what they are truly struggling with. And if they would be, then like Thomas, they could be led to a positive faith in the Lord Himself. Do you ever have doubts? I do. Missionaries have doubts. Not about salvation. Normally a missionary would never have, or a Christian would not. But some people do have doubts about their salvation. Because they know that they're the product of this salvation, and they don't act like somebody that is saved. And they begin to doubt. But Jesus, when Thomas appeared, the other disciples therefore said to him, verse 25, "We have seen the Lord." But he said unto them, "Except I shall see his hands, the print of the nails, and put my finger in the print of the nails, and thrust my hand into his side, I will not believe." Now let's give Thomas some credit. He was only asking for what the other disciples had already seen. Remember, we read it. He showed them his hands and his side. And then they were glad when they had seen the Lord. See, he proved his resurrection to them by showing them. So Thomas was only asking to see for himself. What was promised? You see, after that, Jesus appeared, and in verse 28, he appeared again, the doors being shut, and they were still shut. I don't understand why, because he had already said, "I'm giving you peace to calm your fear, and I'm telling you, I'm giving you peace to get out and go. As the Father has sent me, so send I you," but they were still there. And he appeared again, and the third time he said, "Peace be unto you." Then he looked at Thomas, and he said, "Reach hither thy finger. Behold my hands. And reach hither thy hand, and thrust it into my side, and be not faithless, but believing." I want to give you peace to conquer your doubts, peace to calm your fears, peace to comply with His command to go, and then peace to conquer all of our doubts. Now, Thomas's problem wasn't with what he wanted to see. His problem was what he declared. He did not say, "If I don't see his hands and his side and put my hand in there and put my finger in the prints, it'll be difficult for me." He said, "I will not believe." You see, this was a determined doubt. He was saying, "I will not believe unless I have proof." But when Jesus said to him, "Thomas," I think he already knew. And I don't think he ever put his finger in the prints of the nails. I don't think he put his side. Why? Because that would have been hard to do in the position he was in. He was at Jesus' feet, and he said, "My Lord and my God." What a statement of faith. What a statement of faith. No more doubts. No more doubts. Thomas had determined doubt, but Jesus dispelled his doubt. Incidentally, you remember when the disciples told Thomas, "We've seen the Lord," Thomas's reaction was about the same as theirs when Mary Magdalene told them she had seen the Lord. See, we call him Doubting Thomas. We should call them all doubting disciples. But still the Lord was there to give them peace to calm their fears, to give them peace to comply with His command, and then give them peace to conquer their doubts. And then I like this, and I close, when he says, "Thomas, because you've seen me, you've believed. Blessed are they that have not seen me, and yet have believed." That's me. That's you. I'm homesick for a place I've never been because I love a person I've never seen, whom having not seen, you love. You see, actually, we, because of His Word, have greater blessing than those who saw Him with their eyes. But if Jesus would come into this church room this evening, He would say to us, peace be unto you. Don't be afraid. My peace can calm your fear. Whatever the future holds, don't be afraid. And then He says, don't stay inside your doors, no matter what happens in our government. As the Father hath sent me, so send I you. Here's my peace so that you can comply with my command. And as you doubt, just come to me and I will dispel your doubts, because I will reveal to you who I am. And that's what it's all about. Peace be unto you. Let's bow our heads for prayer.